flag of the United States of America.
On to our May Committee, the whole meeting for Community High School District 94, Board of Education. Mission statement, please.
Community High School will ignite a passion for learning, foster leadership, and empower all learners to live their personal best.
Thank you, Rich. Board agreements, please.
Social media. Board members recognize that while we may be giving our individual opinion or stating a fact on social media, it has potential to impact the entire board. When promoting official district business and activities, personal use of social media should be limited to directly sharing links from the district media platforms without personal editorial or opinion. Board members will not post rebuttals, responses, corrections to district-related social media posts.
Thank you, Lynn. Roll call, please.
Mr. Brown?
Here, or
Ms.
present.
Ms. Casey Mayer?
Present.
Mr. Remus?
Present.
Ms. Munoz? Present. Mr. Nagel?
Present.
Ms. Murphy?
Present.
Ms. Chavez?
Present.
All right, that brings us to public participation. This is the portion of our meeting where any member of the public may address the Board of Education on any topic. We welcome your comments and will carefully listen to your concerns. We will not be able to engage in a dialogue during public participation, but when appropriate, we will direct the administration to follow up. Presentations are limited to no more than 5 minutes per person, with a total time limit of 30 minutes for public participation. If you're making public comment, please speak slowly so the translator is able to keep up with you. If you wish to make personal charges or complaints against individual employees, volunteers, or students of the district, we request that you send the board your concerns in writing rather than stating those concerns during public comment. If anyone currently present wishes to make public comment and hasn't already done so, please fill out one of the comment forms in the back of the room and hand it to someone seated at the table. At this point, we received no advance public comment and no comment cards, so we will move on to reports and information, teaching and learning, professional learning communities.
Okay. Good evening. Thank you again for giving me the time to talk to you a little bit about some of the teaching and learning work that we've been doing this year. Tonight, we're going to focus specifically on professional learning communities, which is going to be the focus for our strategic plan in conjunction with looking at the closing the achievement gap and pathways for next year. I've got 4 areas we're going to talk about. Briefly where we've been in the last year or so, explaining what a professional learning community essentially is, talking about why we're going to be doing this, as well as how, and then ultimately what are the next steps for next year. So first of all, if you can think back to last year when Dr. Johansson was just joining us, there were a number of conversations that he had with the administration, with our division heads, talking about where are we in terms of curriculum and instruction. So there was a bit of an informal audit. I'll elaborate on that in a moment. I want to update you on what we've been doing in terms of instructional council, which was a new structure that we added this year, as well as the staff professional development that's been going on between February and the end of the year, and then ultimately what the summer will look like. So thinking back again to this time last year and those conversations that we were having, A lot of good work has been going on. However, not all of it was unified in terms of focus. Each of the departments had something that they were working on rather than a unifying thread through all of that. So as you can see from the slide, the overall goal was to really look at focus, procedures, and practices across the divisions. And then the work that we did this year was what we were calling cataloging or archiving all of the standards and all of the curriculum maps in each of the divisions. In addition to that, we really focused on expanding the administrative understanding of professional learning communities. We have had course teams here for a number of years. Essentially, that language just means that if you are teaching the same course, then you would work with a group of your peers during late start of professional development time. So this is going to be the shift that we'll talk about with professional learning communities, and then ultimately just preparing for August and what that would look like. So step one that we engaged in both first semester and second, this is a slide that you've seen in a little bit of a different format, but essentially on the left-hand side there, you can see what we were calling a course at a glance. Essentially, that's just listing the targets that a student would be able to anticipate a particular course would cover. In terms of the curriculum maps then, each course would have a different kind of document that would lay out the rationale for the course, potentially essential questions. It would have standards and then the actual texts and assessments in that course. And then ultimately, as you can see on the right for the archiving, each of the courses in a division are all placed in the same place in one spreadsheet. We literally have kind of this snapshot of the whole building at one time. The second addition for this year was that instructional council that I mentioned. So essentially, that's the division heads and directors who are working specifically with content area. You can see a number of different texts that we have been working with. We meet once a week. Initially during the first semester, we were meeting an hour a week. Now we're at a place we're meeting 2 hours a week. And essentially, we've just been designing what is the work that we are going to be using with staff. So essentially, this component was professional development for the administrative team, preparing the team to be able to pass that on to the staff themselves. Making a shift then to what is a PLC, I have just a couple of brief quotes here for you, and I won't read it aloud, but I just did want to point out the part that's underlined at the top, that idea of the recurring cycle of collective inquiry and action research. So as I was mentioning, a course team generally focuses quite a bit on curriculum, and the shift that we'll be making is to focus more so on student learning rather than the teaching component. And it's really focusing on the idea of how can we use student data, how can we use formative and summative assessment data for us to be able to determine what did students learn as a whole, what did individual students learn or not learn, and then ultimately how we'll be able to fill in those gaps. I'll give you a moment to take a look at that second quote on your own. So here again, you can kind of see a series of steps that's embedded in that sentence. So we're looking at the idea of identifying what is critical, what must be taught, looking at the idea of all of us in one course team using the same curriculum and assessments, the common formative assessments. Then afterwards, looking at the achievement, creating our own data for that and reflecting on that. And then one of the shifts as well is really focusing on the strategy and how one teacher may have instructed on something as opposed to the other, and then what does the data demonstrate. So again, the main shift is from what I think for a number of decades has really been the idea of what is the teacher doing to really focusing more so on what is the student able to demonstrate. We went through a document that there's a piece of it that's represented here, and essentially on the left-hand side, again, is that idea of the course team structure. So thinking about teaching, what was taught, coverage, that kind of idea. The shift on the right then you'll see is very student-centered. What have the students learned? Really drilling into particular areas that still there's a need for growth or remediation, the idea of proficiency. So again, the shift here really very much is to this focus on the student and what it is that they've been able to accomplish. The way that this works is that there are 4 main questions that each of the course teams will be using, as well as kind of the building as a whole. So one of the most important things to think about is that we see ourselves as a building, as a professional learning community, and that we're working to create these structures together that will support different course teams. So everyone is on a team, however, that's just part of a larger whole. So these 4 questions, first, require teams to really reflect on what are those standard skills and targets. How well are they articulated? Are they aligning to what the assessment is, and really kind of taking a deep dive unit by unit. The second question there is looking at the idea of how are we going to be able to determine whether or not students have learned that? So really focusing in on the assessment and the data component. And then ultimately questions 3 and 4 are, again, this larger building piece is what will we do when students can't learn, or they have not learned at this point. So in an elementary school setting, we have all that flexible grouping that can happen, and teachers are used to that, and that's not the kind of structure that we have at the high school level. So one of the things that we have to focus on is where are the places that we can intervene. We made the move to academic support. We have things like Core Lab, but that's not necessarily going to be the only ways that we would be able to help students get to the place that we need them to. So that will be an ongoing look in terms of the building, as how will we be able to provide that. And then ultimately the goal is to be able to get to the point where we're identifying students early on who've already mastered what they should know perhaps in a particular unit, and what enrichment can we offer to them since they've already mastered those targets. I've got a few slides here for you to see the base of this in terms of research. So again, not looking at reading the whole thing to you, but really focusing in on the green there. Results is the idea. So the only way that we know that this works is by the increase in student learning. As well as here that we see the idea of that data is the way that we'll measure that, rather than something more anecdotal, the way that the teachers feel. We're really looking at how can we drill down into the information that's being created by assessments. On this one, this also shows another shift. This is looking at the idea of collaborative teaming, and again, we've had that with the courses, but now instead of teachers thinking about their own students, we really want them to think about, the 200 students who are in English 1, and that there's this interconnectedness between that group, that I'm not only responsible for the students who are, in the maybe 2 or 3 sections that I teach, but what are the commonalities that are being experienced across that whole group? So there's that idea of collaboration. There's also the reference here to the idea of hope and confidence, and really being able to put teachers in a situation where they feel that we can make the difference that we're attempting to do, so that there's not that level of isolation, but us working together as a course team, as a department, and then interconnectedly as a building, that we can get to that idea of collective efficacy, that all of us together can make a difference. In terms of providing the why that we shared with teachers, there were 4 main goals that you can see there on the left-hand side that research demonstrates are outcomes of effective PLCs. And that is one of the really important distinctions, is that you can call something a professional learning community, but unless you're engaging in the behaviors and what you saw there as the right work, then it really is not a professional learning community. But here, if you do it the right way, we're looking at the change in student outcome or student learning. Hopefully that also positively impacts teacher attitude and beliefs. Change in teacher knowledge is going to come from that conversation of strategies and how their colleagues are able to make a difference. So there's this continued job-embedded learning. And then ultimately that change in teacher practice. So once you've seen these things that work, then you embed it in your own classroom. And then finally, for the research component, this outlines for you ultimately looking at the district piece. The argument being made is that establishing effective PLCs is the most important step that a district can take. That there's the expectation that everyone will engage in this work. So it's not an opt-in, that this is the work that we're all doing and that we have to meaningfully and authentically engage in that. The idea there that policies, procedure, and practices, that there has to be that interconnectedness of that, and there you see connecting that to the mission of learning for all. And so that's definitely, and we're going to see the strategic plan in a moment, but that echoes what we've been talking about, that we're making that commitment to that, and that's something that we need to be able to measure as we go. And then finally, professional learning communities also really focus on the idea of celebration and recognizing what is being accomplished by students and staff. So just to kind of wrap this component of it up, you can see here that we've got the graduate portrait there in the middle on the left-hand side, and these attributes that we want to ultimately see students develop, as well as for the student growth and achievement component. So one way that you can think of linking this together is that the professional learning community is one of the ways that we can achieve the goal that we've set here in terms of goal 1. And then finally, to give you a glimpse of the work that has been and is wrapping up here in May, in addition to having the April Institute, when there was a presentation to all staff, and it was Lauren Stewart, who is our English department head, and Christina Sladek, who's a very veteran science teacher of ours. The two of them and I had the opportunity to really walk the faculty through about an hour and a half of kind of a deeper overview of what this really means, the work that we'll be doing. We've had about 50 faculty members who opted in on their own for a more extended section that they are engaging in. We're going to have administrators who are attending Solution Tree workshop this summer to really kind of enhance with that. Dr. Johansson and I are looking into potentially having a consultant who would be able to advise and work with the administrative team. Division heads are going through and making the decision, what is the one course team that each teacher will be on? So as you can imagine, in some areas we have teachers who teach 5 of the same course. That's very simple, and most people teach 2 or 3. Even at that point, the division head would have to decide, are they going to teach on course team A or course team B? So that is one of the decisions, because everyone is only going to be focused on one in order for us to really be able to do that in a deep and meaningful way in terms of engaging with the data. And then ultimately wrapping up here, we've got the idea of what are the templates, the materials that all teams would use, and then how will we present that to them in August. Finally, we're looking at a multi-year rollout for work that essentially we're embedding forever. So this is not an initiative, this is good work. So it'll take us a number of years to be able to establish this thoughtfully and then continue it from there. One of the things that's most important is that we're providing the professional development to everyone. So everyone is getting the same information, those same experiences. Obviously, it becomes a challenge as we have new people who are being hired every year, but that'll be one of the expectations for us administratively to make sure that people are where that they need to be. Data has not been something that has been really culturally part of what we're doing. This is my 14th year, and we've obviously always made data presentations, and we have data, but it's not something that we've had teachers working with necessarily. And so this will be a really positive shift, but we need to train people the way to do it, have everyone doing it the same way, and look at how is that going and what do we need to change. We'll continue to catalog and archive the work like I told you at the beginning, and then ultimately, as we're doing the 3-time-a-year progress monitoring for the strategic plan, looking at this work as a component of that. So in a nutshell, that's what we've been doing for the last year and forever going forward. So do you have any questions?
A couple questions.
Sure.
It seems like this philosophy is sort of contradictory to the way we grade. Are we looking at, in other words, at the middle of the semester, I could get a 50 on a test compared to somebody else that gets an 80, but I may have learned more to get that 50 than somebody that already had a better foundation and basis.
Mm-hmm.
If I sort of, punitively, I get a D for my 50, but I look back and say, well, I really learned a lot. How do we deal with that?
Sure. I think that they actually are very aligned, aside from the part that you're kind of referencing. So when the work that we've done in terms of grading for equity has been really focused on reporting as accurately as possible. So one of the reasons that we've changed some grading practices in terms of offering retakes and looking at the 90% assessment, 10% practice that we have right now is to give students more opportunities to be able to learn longer, like you're talking about. So if you don't learn it at the beginning of the unit, kids are sometimes doing retakes a few weeks into the next unit. The problem with being able to measure growth that we would report on a report card is we're communicating to universities, employers, a student's level of understanding of that material in that course. So even though a student may have learned more than another and may have gone from 25 to 50 as opposed to someone who's gone from 70 to 80, ultimately it's our obligation to be able to relate how much is it ultimately that they do know. So I definitely understand where you're coming from, but we just don't have that option. Ultimately, the goals have to represent what the students learned by the end of the semester.
What they know, not necessarily what they learned.
Yes,
Right?
yeah, either.
Okay. In reading through the presentation, is this something that we have like a subscription for? Or the solution tree, is that a package that we buy to follow along, or all of this homegrown and developed? I wasn't quite sure.
Sure. Actually, this is something that started in the 90s. And so there's a very large research base that is on it. So we've been using solution tree materials. That's also why we'll be attending the conference to kind of deepen the understanding of the administration. And that's why the research into the consultant. So we may be adapting what materials look like, but it is all going to be very firmly rooted in the research-based solution tree that will kind of walk us through what we're doing.
So solution tree, is that something we purchase then to follow along with?
It's not literally a package. It's more like through the books and the workshops, just doing research, collaborating that may go on professionally. So it's not like you would have essentially a textbook that you would go page by page, but it is a series of documents of philosophy. There's so many materials. It just doesn't look exactly like you're saying in terms of like, it's not boxed, but it's a way of thinking and working.
Any other questions?
Happy to hear that. This is a wonderful opportunity to go slow to go fast.
Yeah.
And the collective impact of a PLC model is just invaluable.
Thank you for the comprehensive presentation.
Sure, thank you.
I would just like to point out, Mary has done an exceptional job this year laying the foundation for our staff and our administration to set us up for a great implementation starting next year. And Penny, to your point, that's exactly the approach we're taking. Let's do this right. You don't get many opportunities to implement a massive initiative that could potentially drastically change outcomes for our students, and we don't want to rush through this. So her thoughtful approach has been instrumental in making sure that we get off on the right foot.
Thank you, Mary.
Thank you. All right, that brings us to end-of-year events.
Hard to believe, but the seniors in this high school will be done a week from tomorrow. And the year has really flown by, and they've been an incredible senior class. As a reminder, we have some great events that any and all of you are welcome to attend as you are able. The first one is a relatively new tradition. It's third year. We call Senior Sunrise. We're 5:30 a.m. If you want to meet me on the football field. all the seniors are welcome to come for breakfast, play games, and watch the sunrise one last time with their classmates. It really has become a great event. On Monday, May 19th, we have our Senior Honors Night, very dignified, wonderful event to honor some of the great achievements of the class of 2025. And on Tuesday, we'll see as many of you as we can at commencement at Northern Illinois University. And last but not least, the final day that we will have all staff here together is Wednesday, May 28th. In the Commons, there will be a staff brunch in which we recognize our retirees. And again, any and all of these, the school community welcomes your presence.
Thank you, Will. Amended FY25 annual budget.
Thank you. Per Illinois School Code, if a budget expense line item exceeds more than 10% of the original budget for any particular fund, then an amendment is required. The district's past practice has been to review the budget for any expense line item that exceeds more than 10% of the original budget for any particular function. This practice provides more transparency and a more detailed review of the original budget. In review of the fiscal year 2025 budget, it was determined that based on past practice, a few expense line items should be amended on the for the projected expenditures for the remainder of the school year. Additionally, student activity accounts for revenue and expense were omitted from the original budget, and we would record those appropriately. Also, the cost of special education transportation has been higher than expected, so we have an increase in that line item. And then to ensure the transportation fund does not fall too low, I've moved some evidence-based funding from the O&M fund to the transportation fund. So the line items, specifically, we have the student activity expense and revenue is just an in and out of estimating $350,000 for the student activity of how much money goes into that student activity fund and how much money goes back out. And then the bilingual expense, I was short one FTE for that budget line item, so that'd be about $100,000. And then food service, the 2560 line item, we've exceeded the free lunch cost item that we had in our contract, which was 51,000 free meals. We're probably going to be closer to 70,000 free meals this year, which is a really nice, good thing for our students that they're actually taking the free meals, so that's good. And then the function number 2900 is other support service expenses. We have about $6,200 worth of expenses in there. Again, this was just a change from ISB initially said to put it in this account number, which is what we did. ISB came back later and said put it into a different account number. And so we adjusted it, and so now the budget is off by that amount. And then, again, the special education transportation expense, I was going to increase that by $100,000. And to offset that increase, I was going to move the EBF money from O&M to the transportation fund to make sure that that fund balance doesn't get too low. We already established that we're going to need reduce that fund balance in the transportation account, but I don't want to get too low. So this kind of helps us protect to make sure that it doesn't go too low. So a detailed report is included with the agenda, along with that updated ISB 5036 annual budget document. Also included in the agenda is the anticipated ending fund balance, which is a required posting on the agenda. So the amendment process and timeline, very similar to the regular budget process. We'll present you the amended budget tonight. We'll display the ISB 5036 amended budget before May 16th as in compliance with the 30 days. And then May 27th, we'll have some more opportunity for questions from the board. June 3rd, Committee of the Whole, more opportunities for questions from the board. And then we'll have a public hearing on June 17th to approve the ISB 5036 amended budget. Any questions?
You mentioned the student activity fund. That's generated with club dues and
Correct.
things like that. We used to have vending machines. Do we still use vending machine revenues for student activities?
All vending machines are done through Quest, our food service management. They operate and control all of that revenue.
So I guess somewhere along the line, we get a sort of a summary of student activity funds and things like that, besides just, the lump number?
There's a document every month noting student activity
Amount.
expenditures and revenues in the board agenda.
Okay.
I think it's in the consent agenda.
Any other questions?
I know approving it, but.
All right. Driver's education car lease ending.
In June of 2023, the district approved the lease of a 2022 Nissan Altima with the maturity date of June 1st of 25. With that lease ending for the Altima, we've inquired with the department heads regarding the need to still have 2 driver's ed cars. Enrollment for the driver's ed course this year has been a total of 343 students in 16 sections. Enrollment for behind the wheel course is 213 students in 18 sections. So based on that enrollment, we still need to have 2 driver's ed cars. So administration, we inquired with Nissan on the cost of the payout of that vehicle. As of April 30th, the payout was $16,270. Actual cost will be lower because we still have a couple of payments left. The mileage on the Altima is only at 15,000 miles. Based on local car prices, comparable vehicles, Kelly Blue Book prices, I think it's in the best interest of the district to just purchase that vehicle out instead of trying to go buy a new one. So I'll expect to bring a recommended motion to the board May 27th to approve that purchase of the vehicle. Any questions?
And we'll continue to use that for driver's ed then?
Correct.
Till it dies?
Correct. Along with the Nissan Sentra that we have.
Any questions? All right, 2025 furniture purchase.
Annually, I've asked the administration and department heads for furniture requests for the upcoming school year. As always, we've tried to standardize most of the ordering to ensure that we have similar furniture throughout the building, and then we also have less unique purchases that make it difficult to work with people. This year, I've received various requests for classroom updates, some flexible conference room furniture, and then just general furniture replacement, as well as new furniture for the new transition apartment. Overall, I've received general requests for replacement of old furniture, such like 4 teacher desks, 12 teacher chairs, 5 wardrobe storage units, and 4 bookshelves. We also have requests to replace old standard desks in classrooms with new tables and separate chairs, and so there's 55 student tables and 200 student chairs. And then for the transition apartment, we'll need 4 high-top tables, 27 stools, and then we're going to add 20 nesting chairs in this room. And then lastly, we have a conference room that we would like to make a little more flexible for students, for staff, things of that nature. So we're going to have 3 or 4 tables in that conference room, along with additional 10 chairs. So the total of all that is going to be around $60,000 or $70,000. I think I might have 3 more desks that I need to add to that, and then also the cost of installation, which would probably be around $10,000, give or take. So total will probably come up to around $70,000. Which I'll bring a finalized quote to the board at the May 27th board meeting. Any questions on that?
Okay, summer food service.
We are continuing with the summer food service program that we started last year. Per ISB requirements, the district had to release requests for quotes for 2 food service providers, which we did on April 25th. We expect to serve meals at Timberlake Apartments again, Turtle Splash Park again, and at the high school. RFQs are due back to the district May 16th, and so we'll have a contract ready to present to the board on May 27th for approval. Any questions?
Thank you, Dan. Support staff FTE recommendation for 2025 to 2026. Julie.
All right, thank you. So we had an opportunity to already discuss the licensed staff recommendation, and now that the support staff contract has been approved, we're ready to start talking about our FTEs for support staff going forward. This is both support and confidential staff that you'll see in this recommendation. The administration is recommending the addition of 2 FTE. One of them would be an administrative assistant position. The other would be a brand new position of a family liaison within our support staff bargaining association. Now, for starters, with the administrative assistant, currently we have 1 position that supports both of our assistant principals and the activities director. It's a really big job. And under the new organizational structure, there's an opportunity to split that up and provide adequate support to both the executive director of professional learning and pathways and the executive director of operations and safety. And so you'll see attached to this memo new job descriptions for both of those positions, which is really just kind of splitting out that old position that will be set aside going forward without the assistant principals being a position within our system. The second piece here that we're really excited about is the addition of a family liaison. Our family outreach program, as you know, began just last summer with the addition of a family outreach coordinator. And in fact, Teresa is hoping to come in the next month to be able to share some of the successes of that program with the board. Her role is a confidential and supervisory role. And that role was created to reduce barriers to student success by fostering communication, trust, and collaboration among families, schools, and community partners. Now, as part of the planned expansion of that program, the administration is proposing the addition of 1.0 FTE for a family liaison, which would be a 12-month position starting on July 1st. It would be within the bargaining unit, so we've been working closely with the Support Staff Association on the development of this job description. And while the job description is attached here, we are still in the process of bargaining the compensation that would go along with this position, because obviously that wasn't a component of the support staff CBA that was just approved this evening. The goal would be to bring a final proposal, including an MOU for that compensation, to the board for approval on May 27th. In terms of financial impact, we'd be looking at an estimated additional cost of $41,500 for the administrative assistant, and likely, although it's not bargained yet, we can intend to spend around $50,000 for the additional family liaison to build out the family outreach program. If you flip to page 2, you're going to see a breakdown of all the FTEs across all of our job categories, both within the Support Staff Association as well as our confidential and supervisory staff. And you'll note an increase in FTE of 2.0 for those two positions that we just discussed, as well as the new job descriptions for the 2 administrative assistants and family liaisons that follow. Any questions?
All right. Miscellaneous wages proposal, 2025 to 2026.
Great. So as you know, every spring, I'll bring a proposal for miscellaneous wages, which are essentially any wages that are not covered in a collective bargaining agreement or another contract. Predominantly what you see in miscellaneous wages are our substitute rates, our temporary workers, and then our event workers as well. Over the last 3 years, I've made a number of recommendations to get us into a really competitive space with our substitute teachers in particular. And I'll say that we have done a tremendous job of not only compensating appropriately, but then supporting substitute teachers that have come in our system. So while a lot of other school districts are still struggling with subs, we're not, and we're really fortunate that we have a wonderful, roster of substitute teachers who are dedicated to this school. And so with that, looking at regional rates, we are still quite competitive, so I'm not recommending any changes to our substitute rates for next year, with the exception of our long-term substitute teaching rate, which is based on the per diem of our BA Step 1 salary in the teacher's contract, which would increase from $247 to $249 a day. The only other change that is being recommended, because again, we've made some significant adjustments within our event worker wages, would be just to match the $15 per hour, which was effective on January 1st of this year, where previously there was sort of a sliding scale depending on the year that was falling in. And that is it for miscellaneous wages.
Any questions? Special Education Transition Program update.
Great. So the transition program, we've been hearing a lot about recently with the addition of the apartment this year. The transition program supports students age 18 through 22 with disabilities in developing life skills and preparing for post-secondary independence. In the upcoming school year, with the addition of that transition apartment, the program is undergoing some significant changes to increase instructional time and expand the services that are provided to these students. We anticipate the improvements will result in great outcomes for the kids, but it's also going to mean a longer instructional day for those teachers. We have worked with the Teachers Association in the upcoming school year, and this is only intended for one school year, to find a way to properly compensate those teachers whose instructional time is going to increase by about 300 minutes per week. We've looked at some other remedies that are going to help to support by utilizing support staff and creative scheduling, but even with that, we know that there's going to be an increase, at least in the short term, of their instructional time. that exceeds the instructional load of our other special education teachers and gen ed teachers as well. And so we're in the process of negotiating. I'll say we've reached an agreement. We're just working on the language that would be related to that to provide those 3 transition teachers with overload pay for the upcoming school year to compensate for that additional instructional time. Again, this is just intended as a 1-year adjustment as we make some adjustments to programming and staffing. And the anticipated cost would be approximately $12,000 per teacher based on the overload pay per the CBA, which is 1/5 of MA0 Step 8. And we'll bring that for approval, hopefully at the May 27th meeting.
Question.
Yes.
Is that increase going to impact the program assistants in the transition center at all?
The program assistants are already scheduled for 8 hours a day that they're there supporting students, so it won't impact their schedules at all. Yeah. Now, the way that their time is utilized, definitely. So as an example, the personal care assistant job coaches who are working in there are taking on some additional responsibilities with WeGoTees to support the business side of that when they're not in immediate student contact.
The additional instructional time for
Yeah.
the transition, is that going to affect bus schedules? I assume that they
No.
get bus service, no?
No.
Because they'll be here longer than other students, right?
Right, and
So
I don't
don't
know if
they
we can
have to
speak to
get-
the, say it again? After 3 o'clock. No, they would end at 3 o'clock. They currently end at 2 o'clock. So their transportation would line up.
Okay.
Yeah.
Any other questions? Finally, updated licensed job descriptions.
Right. We're constantly reviewing job descriptions, trying to stay current and provide periodic updates to reflect our current practices, ensure that there's clarity in those role expectations. At this time, we want to make a couple of pretty major adjustments to a couple of roles within the special education department. One of those roles is one that's been in place but has never been formalized through a job description to date. We've previously called this role an LEA, which I think causes some confusion because there's a bit more to that role. And so you'll see a new job description that is attached here for an IEP implementation and compliance specialist. Again, it's a role that does currently exist. This is adding a job description to clarify the expectations so that the department knows how to utilize an individual and they have clarity in what it is that they're doing in their role. The second one is a role that has existed for quite some time. You've also met Erica Gudisha, who serves in this role of transition coordinator and vocational specialist, retitling that position to specialized post-secondary planning facilitator, and then providing some updates to that job description to make it really clear how she interacts with different stakeholder groups and supports, the staff, the students, the families across the board. These revisions are just intended to better align the titles and responsibilities with the scope of work that's being performed. And we would plan to post, now that our current LEA has accepted employment elsewhere, post the anticipated IEP implementation and compliance specialist so that we can get ahead on the hiring for that role and the domino effect that might cause. And so we would want to post that this week so that we can have a recommendation along with this job description to be approved at May 27th board meeting.
Would you mind giving me giving us some clarification on what that position does as far as family outreach? I know.
Which position? Are you talking about the IEP implementation and compliance specialist that was formerly the LEA, or the vocational? The latter, okay.
Yes.
So the specialized
I'm
post-secondary
talking-
planning
what I'm
facilitator.
specifically asking about is, me being me, I always have a big concern about those kids aging out and transitioning out. Are the parents aware of the resources that are available?
Yeah.
And is that position, or do we have someone who is bilingual to support the non-English speaking parents who really, really need to know what resources are available and help plug people in? And I know years ago, somebody would come from, state run to come and kind of facilitate that. But that's a critical piece as people move out, and especially for the parents to be really cognizant of
Yeah.
things that are available, especially in this very.
You're exactly right. So part of the reason that it was inspired to change the title of this position is that there was a lot of confusion. I mean, everyone thinks of transition in a different way. Some think of it as a transition from 8 to 9. Some think of it as the transition from secondary to post-secondary life. Some think of it as the transition program itself. And so we realized that that was problematic and that people didn't know how to best utilize an individual or what to expect from that role. The other piece is that previously the job description was categorized topically, and now it's really categorized by stakeholder group. And so you'll see it broken down by how does this person support and impact students, families, community partners, and case managers, so that all of those services then come together to best support students as they transition from the learning that they're doing here into life after we go. Specifically with families, yes, this individual does meet with families to discuss their post-secondary options and provide guidance. They support the IEP team in maintaining that contact as well, because it can't all lie with this one individual, but rather with those case managers as well. They guide families through the process of completing paperwork. They coordinate the parent coffee house events that have been really successful this year, provide assistance with other types of intake forms and annual updates, and support them in accessing those adult services and college funding. With community partners, they develop and maintain relationships, specifically as part of this role. They coordinate job placements and community-based job training experiences for the students, partner with external agencies to provide resources and services, serve as a liaison between students, employers, and those community partners, and then plan and coordinate annual presentations and intake days. So they'll be really intimately involved with that, and importantly, supporting the rest of the special ed team. To the last part of your question about the bilingual component, ideally, and in our job descriptions, it is Spanish language preferred. Incredibly difficult to find, right? And our current individual serving in this role, who will continue to be in this role with the new title, she's absolutely phenomenal. She is not bilingual. However, we have a bunch of different supports that are available, including our interpreter, who is specifically there to support the special education program, and would work closely with this position.
Here, so thank you.
Absolutely.
Any other questions? All right, that concludes our business for this evening. Would someone care to make a motion to adjourn?
Moved.
Is there a second? Second. All those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? All right, thank you for a very productive series of meetings. Oh, were you talking about the finish time? Is that what you're going on over there?
What?
I heard somebody, you win, so I was like, did we finish before 8 or not? Is that what was going on? Yeah, that was in the consent agenda.